Hi, I am Harry Hardwick. I am the #1 contender in Cage Warriors featherweight division.
And I'm George Hardwick, Cage Warriors lightweight champion and coach at Middlesbrough Fight Academy.
Today we join you from Fightstorepro in Jedburgh Court in Newcastle and Team Valley. We're just going to go over pads and the different types of pads and what they're good for. Pads are a really good training tool because they allow the person who's holding the pads to move around, and you can practice your footwork a bit more than you could on a heavy bag. And then obviously you can go full power, which you can't really do shadow boxing. But there's different types of pads that are good for different things.
So first, talking about this, the Focus Mitt. It's a Rev D Focus Mitt, and it's got extra padding and extra reinforcement compared to a lot of regular Focus Mitts. Sometimes you go to Sports Direct and you see those ones that are paper thin. This has a bit of extra padding. What's that good for?
Well, the extra padding is, first and foremost, really good for the pad holder. Like, we've all gone through a phase where we've used the crap Sports Direct ones. You end up with knackered hands, and also you just get a lot more impact on your joints, on your elbows and your shoulders, whereas this extra bit of padding saves you as the pad holder from that. Another thing that is really good about Focus Mitts is they are light, they're small. Even these bigger ones with this thick bit of padding, it's really lightweight, and it allows me as the pad holder to throw strikes back. So not only can George practice his strikes and his offense, he can practice his defense, and we can start building phases in. Like, I can get him to throw a combination, then I can throw something back, he can practice a defense and then practice a counter. Limitations of them: it's a bit harder to practice kicks. Even with the extra bit of padding, you're going to struggle to hold the Focus Mitt in a way that's appropriate for a body kick. You can kind of get away with high kicks and stuff, but it can be a little bit risky for the pad holder, especially if the guy who's hitting the pads is less experienced, to hold kicks with Focus Mitts.
Yeah, generally, the less experienced the person you're holding pads for is, you want bigger pads, just in case they don't know what they're doing quite yet.
And speaking of bigger pads, this is where tie pads come in. So tie pads are really, really good for practicing kicks, especially these ones. These ones are big, heavy-duty, double-strap tie pads. They've got a lot of surface area, so there's not really any risk of them catching your elbow or kicking you in the forearm. These are really good for practicing kicks. They're also really good for chaining your punches and your kicks together in combination, like holding for a few punches into a kick, a few punches into a kick.
These ones, being big two-strap ones, are also potentially big enough to pad for low kicks. If you take a little squat and put it on the side here, these two-strap ones, because they're a bit thicker, they're harder to move around and harder to throw back as well. He can roll under a Focus Mitt, but if I try and throw a left hook and make him roll, he wants small, minimal defensive movements, but it might catch him on the side of the head, just due to the size of this. So with these bigger, thick two-strap tie pads, it's amazing for taking these kicks, these body kicks off of big people. I've held pads for people who are like 110, 115 kilos. If I'm doing that, I want a pair of these. I don't want something super thin. If I'm holding pads for a heavyweight, I can confidently pad that and not take too much damage or wear and tear on my joints with this. But not the best for throwing back. In the same way, like a Focus Mitt, you can throw it back so they can practice their defenses, their parries, their slips quite easily. These, it's less about checking their defense, it's more about getting them to hit hard. Maybe an issue to travel with because they're so thick. These are a pair you'd have in your gym, keeping it ready for when people want to practice those power shots.
And a good compromise between the two pads is these, they get called like tie Focus Mitts. These larger Focus Mitts that you can kind of, a little bit of the best of both worlds. You can still get plenty of surface to pad for a kick. There's not much of your arm exposed when you're holding them, so there's not much of a risk of them kicking you in the elbow or the forearm still. But they are lighter, so you can throw back. Like, it's quite easy to throw back. Obviously, when you're holding these, your knuckles are exposed, so you can't really throw straight shots, just at risk of catching someone with bare knuckles, whereas this surface is quite soft, and if the person hitting the pad messes up, there's still some padding here, so you're at least not gonna cut them. They obviously aren't as heavy duty as traditional Thai pads, so maybe if you had like a black owl kicking your pads, you'd probably want something a bit more like this with a bit more padding on it. But these are really good. You can do lots with them.
Yeah, as well, really good for traveling, because if you're coaching fighters and you're traveling to different fight shows around the country, sometimes it's difficult to bring a whole set of pads with you. You need to just make a decision, what set of pads am I bringing? I only have this much room in my bag. These are probably too big to carry around with you. You might have space, but they're very big if you're traveling around coaching fighters. These are good, but if you've only got the space for these, you're not going to be able to pad kicks too well. This I can still hold for body kicks. I can still possibly hold for leg kicks. I can one pad high kicks quite well with these. You see a lot of Japanese fighters in the training K1 currently. They hold these for like snap kicks with the toes, high kick, kicking the counter. They're a really good all-rounder. You can hold for knees as well. Knees to the head, this kind of a thing. This, if you only had space to travel with one of these pads, or maybe you're training on the road a lot, you and your buddy, whoever you're traveling with, you're training a lot, probably use these. This is going to give you the best of both worlds.
Once you get down the line and you get a bit more experience with pad holding, maybe you end up becoming a coach yourself, you're going to want probably a set of each of these in some form. You want some kind of heavy duty Thai pad for the big kickers, for taking those impacts, and also it saves a bit of that impact on your shoulders. You're going to want a set of focus mitts so you can practice those like two-phase attacks. You can work your defense and your counters, and it gives you a lot more freedom as the pad holder to check the person hitting the pad's defense. And then again, you'll want a pair of something like this. It's a good compromise between the two, and if you're traveling, these are a lifesaver.
Yeah, if you could only pick one, it all depends on what you want to do. If you just want to box, obviously the focus mitt. If you want to work on your power and really develop the power, or develop the power of the person that you're coaching, or you're coaching beginners and you want that extra space and that extra padding just to keep yourself safe, use a pair of these. If you want an all-round, this is good. These are the better ones. You can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can pad for body kicks, you can pad for head kicks, and if you're traveling a lot, it takes up a little bit more room than the focus mitts, but you should still have enough room in your kit bag to take a pair of these, whereas these might be a bit clunky, might be a bit chunky for it.
The world of MMA and combat sports equipment can be quite confusing. It's quite varied. There's lots of different things and different bits of equipment that are good for different uses.
But we're here to help you guide you through the wacky world of MMA equipment, to make you make the right choices for whatever combat sport, whatever your goals are within the combat sport. If you want more information, you can come visit Fightstorepro or the Fightstorepro website.
That could have been so bad.
What?
Kicking the counter.